And Samson went to Gaza and saw there a harlot and came to her. To the Gazites it was told, saying, Samson has come here. They compassed and lied in wait for him all night by the gate of the city, and they were quiet the whole night, saying, until the morning light we will kill him. Samson lay until midnight and rose at midnight and laid hold of the doors of the gate of the city and of the two posts, and he plucked them up together with the bolt and put them upon his shoulders, and he brought them up to the top of the mountain that is facing Hebron. And it was afterward that he loved a woman by the brook of Sorek, and her name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, persuade him, see wherein his strength is so great, with what we can prevail against him, that we may tie him up to torture him, and each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Delilah said to Samson, tell me now wherein is your strength so great, with what you may be tied up to torture you. Samson said to her, if I will be bound with 7 moist bowstrings, that do not dry when I shall become weak, and be as any man. And the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 moist bowstrings that did not dry, and she bound him with them. Now the ambusher stayed in the room, and she said to him, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And he tore the bowstrings as a string of tow is torn when it is smelled by fire, and his strength was not known. Delilah said to Samson, behold, you have mocked me and told me lies. Immediately now tell me with what you may be tied up. And he said to her, if I will be tied up with new ropes, with which no work has been done, then I shall become weak, and be as any man. Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. The ambushers were staying in the room, and he tore them from his arms like a thread. Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me with what you may be tied up. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head to the roller. And she fastened it with a peg and said to him, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and plucked away the peg of the web in the roller. She said to him, how can you say I love you while your heart is not with me? These 3 times you have mocked me, and you have not told me wherein is your strength so great. And it was as she nagged him with her words every day and pressed him, that his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart, and said to her, a razor has not come upon my head, for I am a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I will be shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak, and be like any man. Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. She sent and called to the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this time, for he has told me all his heart. The lords of the Philistines came up to her, and brought the money in their hands. She put him to sleep upon her knees, and she called to the man. She shaved off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. She said, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times, and I will shake myself. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and they brought him down to Gaza and bound him with copper chains, and he did grind in the prison house. And the hair of his head began to grow after he was shaven. And the lords of the Philistines gathered to over a great sacrifice to Dagon their god, and to rejoice, and they said, our God has delivered our enemy Samson into our hands. The people saw him and praised their God, because they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our land, and who has slain many of us. And it was when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson, and he will make a sport for us. And they called for Samson out of the prison house, and he made sport before them, and they stood in between the pillars. Samson said to the lad that held him by his hand, "Allow me, and let me feel the pillars whereupon the house rests, that I may lean upon them." Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And upon the roof there were about 3,000 men and women, the spectators of Samson's sport. Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord God, remember me and strengthen me now, only this once, O God, that I may be avenged, the vengeance for one of my 2 eyes from the Philistines." Samson grasped the 2 pillars of the center, upon which the house rested, and leaned upon them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. Samson said, "Let my soul die with the Philistines and be bent with his might." And the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. And the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his lifetime. And his brothers and all his father's household came down and carried him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father. And he judged Israel 20 years.